All right. Good morning, everyone. It's 9 o'clock. And we're here with the admonishments. Let's see. Yeah, we're going to call to order the meeting first. And some overhead. We got to approve the minutes from...
You want to have a roll call?
Okay, roll call first. Thank you.
Tom Lavanino,
Present.
Brad Bennington, John Elliott,
Here.
Sarah Wallen-Daly. Here. Jack Galpin.
Present.
Good. I guess Brad will be joining us later, I understand, so he'll show up in a bit. First order of business will be approval of the minutes from September 24th. I'm sorry, July 24th. Wow, that goes way back. September 25th and October 23rd. You all had a chance to look at those? Any edits, suggestions, approval for motion? I move to approve then July 24th, September 25th, and October 23rd minutes from the public meetings.
Second. Tom Lavanino,
Yes.
Brad Bennington, John Elliott,
Yes.
Sarah Wallen-Daly.
Yes.
Jack Galpin.
Yes.
Okay, well, let's hope Brad will show up here, but I'll start with the admonishments, and it'll take some time. This hearing this morning is for Jackson County Planning File number 439-25-00003-LRP. This is a continued public hearing on a consideration of a minor comprehensive plan map and minor zoning map amendment to change the comprehensive plan map designation from rural residential land to industrial land, and the zoning map designation from rural residential 5 to light industrial, located at 2000 Rogue River Drive. Paige Stevens and Brad Engel are the applicants. Number of items I'm required to address prior to the start of the hearing. The approval criteria used in making this decision are listed in its entirety in the staff report. Please direct your testimony and evidence toward applicable approval criteria. Remember that a failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the Planning Commission and other parties an opportunity to respond to the issue will prevent appeal on that issue to the Land Use Board of Appeals. Morning, Brad. All participants who wish to speak must sign up on the sign-up sheet provided.
I think it was closed.
County is making a verbatim recording of the hearing. In the event of an appeal, it will probably be necessary to transcribe it. Therefore, when you testify or comment, please speak loudly and clearly so that your testimony will be recorded. Begin by identifying yourself so that anybody reading a transcript of the record will know who's talking. We need to have you clearly identify yourself with your name and address for the record. Any written comments must be submitted to the clerk to be marked as an exhibit for the record. Procedure for the hearing will be as follows. First, the commissioners will indicate whether or not they have had an ex parte contact or a conflict of interest. Second, we will have a staff report from the county planning staff. Commissioners may have questions of the staff at this time. Third, we will reopen the hearing, and then we will hear first from the applicant. Fourth, we will hear from those in favor of the amendments. Fifth, we'll hear from those opposed to the amendments. Sixth, we will then hear from those wishing to speak from a neutral position on the amendments. Seventh, the applicant will have an opportunity to respond to any testimony. Testimony from the public and agencies will be limited to 5 minutes. Anyone needing more time to testify than allotted should submit their additional comments in writing. Finally, once everyone has had an opportunity to speak, The public hearing and associated public record will be closed. Unless the public hearing is continued by the commissioners to a future date, the public hearing will be closed for deliberation by the commissioners. Once the public hearing and public record are closed, the chair will call for deliberations prior to making a decision. Okay, at this time, I'd like to ask the commissioners if they have had any ex parte contacts or conflicts of interest.
Before you do that, a point of order. I think the public hearing was closed last time. Are you reopening the public hearing?
Okay,
How do you do that? What are we basing that on? Because it was closed.
I have a statement about that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so
I'll be addressing that.
okay, then I'll formally ask or state that, or you'll state that, I guess. That'd be good enough?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, let's get started then. Let's request a planning staff report from Charles Bennett.
Oh, by the way, I have no conflict.
No, we need to declare.
No conflict. No conflict.
And no conflicts. Or, yeah. No ex parte contacts.
All right. Good morning, Commissioners. Charles Bennett, 10 South Oakdale, room 100, Medford, Oregon. So I guess I'll go straight to that question of why we're reopening. We'd like to reopen the hearing. Basically, there's a LUBA case, Gardner v. Marion County from 2008, that talks about where a local government, when we're accepting new evidence, argument, or testimony, and in this case, we're accepting new argument, which is the findings that we have in this Exhibit 1 in the record, that there must be an opportunity for every participant to raise new issues regarding the argument. And so there's an ORS 197.797 that states what an argument is, means assertions and analysis regarding the satisfaction or violation of legal standings or policy believed relevant by the proponent to a decision. Argument does not include facts. So we had this whole discussion last meeting about no new facts were added to the record, but we are adding findings, which are argument. Thus, for the safety of the procedure, it makes sense to open the hearing and then proceed as we normally do through our process. So that's the reasoning for why we insist on opening the hearing. The other thing, other topics I'd like to talk about is that the agent and staff worked together to look at these findings, and they are exhibited as Exhibit 1. The conditions are Exhibit 2, which we believe need refinement still, and there'll be small tweaks to those conditions. For instance, the traffic impact analysis, the applicant believes that that process will be done by the time it goes to the board, so we wouldn't need that necessarily as a condition going forward. There's the landscaping issue that we need some refinement, and staff needs to work with the applicant to get that. And so there'll be some tweaks to the conditions moving forward to the board. The other one that's a condition that the square footage of the building, that's a condition in the record. We should have the existing square footage of the building. We don't need to condition that out. That should be in the record for the approval, is knowing the exact square footage of the building. So I'd like to see that. Finally, on the Exhibit 3, in the email that you received and the hard copy you have, that's the use table of the allowed uses for the light industrial. It didn't make sense after reviewing it further to create a use table that mimics what's in the LDO exactly, because this is a special circumstance. This use table is only for this property. So it needs to be exclusively, look differently than what's in the LDO. So I have proposed just a modification to the way it's presented as Exhibit 3. So I'd like to exchange out the Exhibit 3 in your record for the Exhibit 3 in front of you, and the applicant has one. The uses have not changed, and those uses were agreed upon with staff and the agent applicant. So that's pretty much what I have, and I can answer any questions.
Say that once more, Charles. The uses weren't changed, but you want a new document.
Well, we worked together in the initial, we had a meeting and discussed some uses that could be removed from the use table. So they're different from the original record the applicant submitted. There was a few that were removed. For instance, a laundry facility, like a dry cleaning facility, doesn't make sense there. There were a few other ones, but these are the uses that were agreed upon by the applicant and staff.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, so I've got a question, probably more procedural than specific to what staff just testified. But I'm going to ask staff first, and I'm going to ask that it be confirmed by Deputy Counsel Philbrick. So is it that we are having this discussion because at the last meeting there was a decision rendered of approval with conditions to be determined in the future? Now this is something that in my experience had never been done by this body before. We're going to, normally we'd have the ability for an application to either approve with conditions, deny, or continue. Those four things, and I believe that was what Deputy Counsel suggested. And then to add a fifth one, which is to approve with conditions that would be defined at some point in the future, that was something that had never been done before. So procedurally, what we're doing this morning makes sense to me. And my other question, which is not specific to this hearing, but just procedurally, is moving forward when we have applications, are we going to limit ourselves to those four responses: approve with conditions, deny, or continue?
Commissioner, thank you. One of the things I'd like to add to your comment is the findings. That we had a lack of findings, so that was a key component as well, approving without findings and the conditions. So I would agree with that, and you can see if.
I agree with Charles. I think an approval subject to future negotiation between staff and the applicant isn't actually an approval at all. And so this is formalizing that process.
So regardless of what happens this morning, but moving forward, when applications come before the commission, are we going to typically limit ourselves to one of those four responses: approval with conditions, denial, or continue?
Typically, those are the only actual actions that can occur. And so I think, the applicant wanted to put the Planning Commission on the record, but without actual findings or, with indeterminate findings, I don't think it's, binding going forward.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So can I follow up on that for just a second? Your question is whether the conditions have to be with the approval or can be added later, right?
Yeah, it's that's right. That's right, Commissioner. I mean, if we're just going to grant approval based on findings and things that may occur in the future, that seems to be somewhat problematic.
Well, I think in this case, the conditions were going to come back for our review and concurrence. So does that count? In that, I guess what I'm asking is what happened, and with conditions being brought forth at another meeting, does that comply with your four your four possibilities, or were you thinking that conditions could just be added any old time as a fifth possibility?
My question was, from a policy position, what is, we're just unpaid volunteers. So we don't set policy, we make decisions, hopefully in compliance with the policies that have been set by others. So my question is what is the policy? That's my question. It's not whether I'm satisfied or dissatisfied with policy. My question is what is the policy moving forward?
So is that a legitimate question? I mean, if there are going to be conditions applied later, does that have to be to a time specific where the planning commission is going to hear them and pass judgment on them? Or, as Mr. Bennington maybe is implying, they just come at any old time?
So the applicant asked for a tentative decision subject to future findings to be negotiated by staff and the applicant. And
But to be brought back to this meeting?
at a continued hearing, correct. And so my opinion is that that is not an actual decision by this planning commission because it depends on future events that haven't happened. And so the reason we have this hearing here today and the reason we're opening up for a public hearing again is so that that decision can be made and that all of the parties have an opportunity to respond.
So the answer to Mr. Bennington's question is he's right.
Correct.
Four possibilities.
Correct. And it's, it's within the discretion of this commission to make a tentative decision, but my opinion is that's not legally meaningful.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
That was a good discussion. And you're done with your presentation? That was quick. So the changes from last time to this time, you've worked out some of the findings and coordinated small issues with the applicant?
Right, I mean, the findings the applicant presented findings, which are in front of you. They're, quite frankly, not the findings of staff, which is fine. It's your discretion to accept those findings. But they are findings for the record.
And you're still, as staff, recommending the denial of the application?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
So can I ask a question? So if the planning commission ends up recommending that the application be denied and the county commissioners uphold that recommendation, then what's left for this parcel? What can they do? What can't they do? How do they move forward?
If the Board of Commissioners deny the application, then they would have a non-conforming use on the property.
So they could open it up, build boats again?
Right, and they could come back for a alteration of a non-conforming use, which I believe would require the rural light industrial zoning I don't have that chapter. In chapter 11, it talks about but the non-conforming use as application is approved could continue. The applicant.
I mean, they would have to reapply to do?
No, it's
okay.
continued. Yeah,
So they could continue making boats, building boats, doing what they've been
per the non-conforming use
Right.
verification and yeah.
with the same number of people, the same, generally.
Within the
same.
guidelines of that approval.
So what is that, how does that affect the other two parcels that were designated? Would they disappear then and the whole thing would become industrial or stay as industrial?
The other two it's all rural residential. There was a partition that was approved. It hasn't
Okay,
been.
so that would stay, that partition?
It's not been final. They haven't met all the conditions for that, but they're likely to do that.
So
At this point, it's all one parcel, 15 acres.
So, okay,
think.
that was, I guess, so if it's denied, then do the 15 acres stay intact as one parcel?
No, this is not.
So that's separate?
That's a separate
So
application.
they'd end up with the building and 5 acres, whatever that is.
Correct.
Plus 2 other RR5 parcels that they could sell or do whatever they wanted to with.
Right, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's hear from the applicant.
Oh,
Oh,
Did
go
you,
ahead.
sorry, Commissioner, did you open the hearing? I don't, you're at the staff report level.
I thought you were going to, you explained that. Anyway, we're opening the public hearing once again, and we'll hear from the applicant.
Good morning, Commissioners. Again, for the record, Jay Harlan, CSA Planning with Office at 44. On. There we go. Good. Again, for the record, Jay Harlan with CSA Planning with offices at 4497 Brown Ridge here in Medford. I mean, I don't think we have a lot to add. I think, you know, we worked back and forth with staff on uses that would allow appropriate use of the property going forward, that we think can meet the compatibility standards for the neighborhood. We've stipulated to doing some things aesthetically to the property when it gets reused, that I think also adds to the compatibility to the neighborhood. And we've, you know, reviewed it with Greg Hathaway, legal counsel for the project. He's comfortable that this is a defensible decision, so we would request the Planning Commission approve it with the revised findings as submitted. I'm happy to answer any questions.
It's the same one, Jay. Why don't you just go forward as it is?
I think I talked about this a little bit last time. It's pretty much impractical. I mean, in the real world, like non-conforming uses, oh, they're fine. You can't finance them. You can't. It's just because every time you got to go back, and relatively small changes can trigger amendments to your, you know, to your approval. I mean, the way I look at it is, I would say 2 things. One is the you have a development code that's intended to lay out standards so that things are uses and physical development is done in a thoughtful way. This lets any property owner now or in the future rely on that. And then number 2, like zooming all the way back, this site is basically kind of essentially an oversight. Most other sites like this got designated industrial way back at the beginning when the county did their comprehensive plans. And I've looked at a bunch of them over the years, and that's just how most of them are, for whatever reason. And I think the main reason this one ended up what it is because it was all one piece. So it was 15 acres, a significant portion of it wasn't developed with industrial, and a smaller portion was, and so it ended up getting designated rural residential. We have a partition approved that essentially resolves that, and will let the portion that is industrial continue to be used for that purpose.
This is a real dilemma for me. I don't know about the commissioners, but here's as you pointed out numerous times in the last couple of meetings, a done deal, essentially. And yet, it doesn't work, and there's no place for the county or whoever else is making the rules to figure out how to make it an approved, usable facility. So what's the answer to that dilemma? Do we just say, okay, tough luck, go do what you have been doing and be happy?
No, I think the answer is that's why we've submitted the revised findings, and staff may disagree with them, but I think council talked about the parties. I don't see a lot of parties. Like, I think the county's been here at hearings when it's spilling into the back and people are pretty upset about whatever's going on. That's not really the case here. And I think it's an opportunity to provide some jobs in a north portion of the county that doesn't have a lot of employment opportunities. There's a lot of people who live, you know, off Tiller Trail. I mean, not a ton, but live off Tiller Trail Highway, live past Shady Cove on the Rogue River, sort of down Sam's Valley. Well, this provides them an opportunity to have a job that's a well-paying job, especially if KCI ends up moving in there, that's a well-paying job that competes on a global scale, and they're not having to drive, you know, they're basically able to stay on rural roads and not having to drive through where there's congestion and get to and from their house to their job pretty efficiently. I think that's a pretty good opportunity that the county should capitalize on.
I guess my question is a little different in that if the county is applying the land use rules correctly, then it's an appealable decision by the commissioners, no matter what they do.
Every decision's appealable.
Sure.
And
I think we would like, I'm speaking, I don't mean to speak for everybody else. I think the Planning Commission would like to find some resolution that everybody could agree on, but I guess that time is gone. Is that correct, you think? That you and the county could come to some resolution?
well, on this, you're the county.
Yeah,
Well-
I think last time we discussed whether or not their position of the semantics of what qualifies and or I guess their definitions of what they think is defensible versus what the staff think is defensible to the board. So they have a different position. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Mr. Harlan? So that was their whole presentation last time, was how they're defining what is defensible versus what the staff finds
I hear that, and I think they're both bending the rules. So my question is, how do we resolve that?
Well, and
Maybe we can't.
And I guess what I would say is I completely disagree, because most of these sites, most of the county's comprehensive plan has not changed with respect to land use designations from when the original exceptions were taken. For whatever reason, this one did not get designated some sort of industrial zone. Had it have been zoned an industrial zone at that time, there was a subsequent statute that the legislature passed that placed no limits on the basically building square footage, any of the intensity of the use of those industrial sites that were designated. That's the part we're stuck with. We don't meet that statute, so we're going to be limited to what's there. But had that been done, then it would already be industrial, and we wouldn't be here, and there wouldn't be any. So we're really just going back and applying criteria that is very similar to the criteria that applied way back when the county did those map designations back in the early 80s, and just saying, well, let's reapply them and apply that one here so that it can be used consistent with the industrial development of the site. It's that simple.
Mr. Chairman? Yeah, so Jay, I think Commissioner Elliott's right. So there's definitely a desire on the part of the commission to be helpful. But we've got this kind of conundrum that we're trying to figure out how to solve. And one of the things that occurs to me is helpful is to recognize the historical context of this property that you've been describing. That Senate Bill 100 passed in 1972. Oregon Land Use Planning was created in the next legislative session. But this business and the use of this property predates all that, doesn't it?
Well, the boat building business came later, but most of the industrial development does predate.
Yeah.
That's correct. And most similarly situated properties in the county got designated industrial.
Yeah.
But nobody's going to do it perfectly. There's 96,000 tax lots in Jackson County or something like that. Like the county did a good job, but nobody's going to do it perfectly.
Yeah. This was a piece. Nobody was trying to get away with anything back in the day. It was for the day and for the time. It was an appropriate development, and nobody was trying to get away with anything. And then this opportunity that you just described, where there would have been an opportunity to get the correct zoning, somehow that just got missed. The owner was busy running his business. This stuff is kind of arcane, so it seems to me it's almost like one of those arguments, there but for the grace of X. If this just could have been caught at that time, we wouldn't even be having this discussion today. Is what you're saying? Isn't that right?
That's right. And I would also say, if the 5 acres of industrial development was on its own parcel, which it's now approved to be, I think then it would have been designated industrial. But at the staff level, when they were looking at it, there's like, oh, there's this additional land, and we're concerned that if we designate it all industrial, that 15 acres of industrial out there might be too much. It didn't come up. Nobody contested it. So then we landed sort of where we are.
Yeah. And this is really a one-off, isn't it? I mean, Jackson County's got almost 2 million acres in it, and this is just a one. I mean, there's probably nothing else like that out there, is there?
I wouldn't say there's nothing, but you can definitely count them on one hand, and you're probably not going to need all your fingers.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No further questions for Jay? All right, I think that's,
Thanks.
thank you, Jay. And next we'll hear from Nathan, I guess that's called Everson? All right, but you'll say what it is. So-
Nathan's with CSA, and my calendar got a little messed up, so I think he wrote down his name in case I really got screwed up and didn't make it here. So he's good.
He does not want to speak?
He doesn't need to testify now.
Okay. Yeah, he didn't check if he wants to speak or not, so I didn't catch that. All right, now, what are we at here? And Charles, do we have any other additional, I haven't had an opportunity to look through all of the documents, weren't much. They added to the compounding paperwork here. No other comments from the public?
No.
Okay. So, I guess we're into the discussions or further questions or even admitting exhibits. Which way do you guys want to go?
Mr. Chairman, I have a follow-up question for staff. So Charles, you put an awful lot of work into this application, research, the actual composition of the staff report and so on. And it's my belief that within the limits that you're allowed to operate in, that you've tried to be helpful with this application. So this is a hard question. I'm going to ask you if you can answer it. So with all the work that you put into this and knowing the very unique nature of this property, we know that some of the boxes perhaps haven't been checked cleanly. Do you see a path, and Commissioner Elliott kind of asked this question, but from where we are now, is there a path forward that could allow us as a commission to recommend this to the Board of Commissioners to review successfully? Is there something that you see that would allow us to do that?
Well, I mean, I would say that, I mean, the rural light industrial rural limited industrial was the path that most fit to this situation, I think. So that would have been staff's preferred path than where we are today. But I mean, the findings in the staff report kind of outline. There's a lot of holes from the process side of it on the staff side, but yeah, like the applicant said, that there's differing opinion on that, and so I don't know. It is a hard question for sure.
So would rural light industrial have erased your objections?
Rural limited industrial.
No, sorry.
Well, there are findings like the policy 8 was a big issue, whether that was applicable or not in the record. As the record stands, it's I don't see all the boxes checked that needed to be checked. Now, working with the applicant to find a way to make those boxes checked, staff is always trying to work with the applicants to get an approval as best, within the legal process.
So, but you said you would rather they had used the rural limited industrial, whatever you call that zone. And now you're saying, but it wouldn't have met your muster either.
Well, as the record stands, yes. I mean, there were significant questions that staff had with.
And you think
with the
they could have
criteria.
Answered them differently than the
Absolutely, yeah.
answers were made?
Right. Correct. I think one of the key things is that the legal opinion from the attorney was that there is some discretion on the planning commission and the board as how to interpret these rules, And I don't think staff necessarily disagrees with that. I think, but it makes more logical sense from staff's position that it's a special situation warranting a rural limited industrial zoning rather than a general light industrial zoning. But it's been limited here. There's a use table that's been limited, but
If the planning
we went through
commission
that. Yeah.
decided to make a recommendation of no recommendation, how would that present to the county commissioners in the form of the applicant restating their case to the county commissioners?
Well, it would be a denial from the planning commission. There would be a recommendation of,
No, it would be no recommendation.
It would be a denial. It would default to a denial.
We have 4 choices.
It would default to a denial if you don't make a recommendation.
Okay. Is that written down somewhere?
even,
No, I'm not arguing, I'm just curious.
well, one of the things is if there's a tie vote of two, if there were 2 people that approved it and 2 commissioners that denied it and a third person abstained, that a
What if
tie.
What if
goes
the
back.
motion was to make no recommendation?
That's probably what Brad was correct in, that there are 4 options available. I'm not sure that there's a no
We've already
recommendation.
used one beyond the 4. So why stop now?
That's up to you, I guess, Commissioner. That's within the discretion of the commission, I guess.
Well, this is a struggle for me. I don't want to go against what staff thinks is following the rules, and I think the applicant has a legitimate reason to want to do what they want to do. And it's a dilemma. I honestly don't know what to do.
I guess I have a follow-up question. You did work together with the applicant, correct? So,
Yeah, we had a short meeting, I don't know, a few weeks ago, and then last week, the applicant submitted some findings. But, as you saw, we got them, the findings the same day that we had to mail the record to the commissioner. So it's shortened time, It's very limited time of actually going over everything together. It's not like we've had hours of negotiation or anything like that. Not that that's necessary, but it's been brief and rather quickly. Just like I said, I'm still would like to refine the conditions to some degree. It's just the amount of time. It's, usually a lot of this is front-loaded, right? It's in a pre-application conference. It may be some meetings even before that. But we just haven't done that here.
You mean if there was more time, you may come to an agreement?
Well, that's up to the applicants and what their position, I think, has been pretty solid of where they want to come, their position that they want to defend.
You implied that their findings the presentation of their findings didn't give you time to adequately pursue them, maybe. So my question is, if you had more time, would that change your mind, maybe?
No, I guess not. I had plenty of time to review the findings, and there was no new evidence, no new facts that addressed the holes in the original application, in the original staff report. There were findings that fill where there were no findings before, but that doesn't mean that they're adequate findings from my position, from staff's position. Does that make sense?
Well, regrettably, yes.
It's not ideal. Yeah, I understand the struggle that you have. I can appreciate that because it's not the struggle that staff wants either.
is there anything they could have done? Like, it just seems like we keep coming back to, maybe it was time, maybe it was like, it just seems like there's a fundamental disagreement here.
I think that's correct.
So the change between now and the last meeting, I don't see a significant difference, or the findings haven't really shed new light onto our understanding of the process here.
Well, just so we're all clear, we were directed to work with the applicant to bring you findings of approval based on your last meeting. So that's exactly what staff has done. We haven't changed our opinion, they haven't changed theirs, but we worked with the applicant to bring you findings for approval. So now you have the findings of approval to move forward. So I guess it would be, the question from staff is, are you satisfied with these findings of approval?
And do we think that they're strong enough to be defensible in front of the board? That's the
Absolutely.
core argument.
Absolutely.
'Cause that's
Even
where they're
though you're
different.
recommending denial.
Correct, but it's in our authority to supersede.
Well, so that, you're confusing it a little bit by saying findings of approval that we deny.
No, staff was directed to bring back findings of approval based on the last meeting, because you wanted to tentatively approve it, and so we have worked with the applicant to bring you those. It hasn't changed staff's opinion on the project, but but the Planning Commission was clear in what they wanted from staff and the applicant.
What I thought we asked for was a meeting of the minds between the applicant and the county staff.
So you were asking us to change our minds on our findings of denial?
We were hopeful that you would blend your disagreement and come up with agreement.
I understand.
If I might add something, I think the point of these, our position is to be able to settle the differences in these arguments for special situations such as these. So I think this is a prime example of the authority in our position here to vote upon letting these people proceed because of this, special circumstance where there is just a stopgap between the two bodies. So I don't think we need to, I don't think we're ever going to kind of find this untying position that you're hoping for, and I think we're going to be forced to vote here today whether or not we agree with our stance of last time based on this new information. I think we're stuck here.
The applicant is proposing that the zoning should have been changed. And that, where does that fit in anything? I can say I should have been tall, but I'm not.
I think maybe we can.
So how do we get past that?
Can I ask Mr. Harlan a question? Is that okay? Jay, would you define this as something that's more of like a cleanup action for oversight from past designations, rather than trying to make an advantageous position for the owner?
Correct. That's right. And to clarify, I'm not saying it should have. I'm saying the criteria now is not that much changed from what it was in 1982. And for the vast majority of properties in a similar situation, the county designated them industrial at the time. The vast majority, like relatively, like I said, I'll probably retire from doing this, and I doubt I'll bring one more instance like this back to the county. So I think Commissioner Galpin's thinking is what I'm actually saying.
How is that different from it should have been changed, but it wasn't?
It's different in that staff's position is that it can't be approved, right? Because of these criteria that we believe are not applicable. What I'm saying is the criteria for physically developed exception for an industrial site isn't that much different from what it was back in 1982. It's pretty much the same. And the county did it in numerous instances there, and it was acknowledged by the state when the county sent up the whole package to DLCD to designate all the lands in the county. So if you could do it then, I think it can be done now, defensively. It's really like that simple. And then the should goes to what we're talking about here today, which is there's an opportunity to create jobs on the north end of the county, and those other sort of discretionary, squishy, like what makes sense for the county, you know, and I do think like, you know, part of when you get into that part, the discretionary part, like if the neighborhood's okay with, appears to be okay with it, they're not like categorically objected to it, then the benefits of designating an industrial outweigh the whatever would be the negative, which I can't really figure out too much what that would be anyways.
Mr. Harlan, you can correct me if this has already been stated, does the property that's operating an industrial use right now, though non-conforming, does it have any sort of landscape buffering from the surrounding community, or is it just open to the community?
It's basically I mean, there's fencing. That's it. So we're proposing to upgrade it. That also goes to the should. The should here is it's, I think, going to be made more compatible going forward because there will be some attractiveness upgrades. And that goes a long way in a rural area. Like how it looks matters on the Rogue River or near the Rogue River.
So it seems to me that this is, although there's a fundamental disagreement, it does seem to be more of a community benefit. And our stance is to work on behalf of the community, right? So it's a cleanup action which helps, I believe, future planning designations and operations with a defined table, gets out of a non-conforming space and allows the community, for this site to integrate more positively with the community as well.
I appreciate that, but don't forget, they can go right back out there and start building boats tomorrow.
Correct.
But they can only go back and start building boats tomorrow. They can't sell.
No, they could do any of these things.
Not without.
Not
that's
without
not,
us
no.
approving it.
Well, no, you would have to go through the non-conforming use amendment process.
Well, as
and
long as it's manufacturing, you could probably produce baby buggies without any changes.
No, when the use changes, you're gonna have to go back through the non-conforming use amendment process.
You mean it has to say boats?
Yeah.
Yeah,
What if it
Yeah.
became rafts?
So
That's
that's
what
the whole,
that's what we're doing.
we're trying to remove this
They don't
recurring
get-
process of application for every use change as the.
Right.
That's right. That's,
They don't
correct,
get the
girls?
table unless we adopt the table.
I mean, occasionally the change is so small, like the county might consider it not a change, but I've done a lot of
Okay,
non-conforming
I'm-
uses, and
I'm
it doesn't
sorry,
need to
didn't
be
mean
that much.
Step that far out. You can go back and do what you did, which is what you said you wanted to do, is go back and make boats.
That was
No,
never-
I think what we want to do is help make a site for the guys who compete globally for,
Okay.
Basically the stairways that go up to planes and the things that take your luggage to planes on the tarmac, because that's who's has expressed interest in the
Right.
property, and that's an existing
Yeah.
business in the valley that
Okay,
competes with 3 other companies worldwide. Those are hard to find.
I hear you. So do you agree that if this isn't approved, they could do nothing but make boats?
No, I don't agree that, I mean, they would have to go through a non-conforming use amendment, which is a type 2, I believe it's a type 2 application. It's a current planning, 2 or 3. It's certainly not a planning commission or board of commissioners requirement. But if they were to expand, it would
So
require.
if they wanted to make boarding ramps, would that be a type 2, whatever you're calling this? Could they change it from building boats to building boarding ramps?
Yeah, I believe that a non-conforming amendment could, whatever use, it would be limited in its capability to what it's currently approved for.
75 employees, or whatever the number was.
Right, there was some,
And
there was some time constraints, and, I mean, the employees wasn't conditioned that way, correct? It was talking about the impact of the non-conforming. It was a 77 approval. It had some limitations of hours, and
so if they could show that they wanted to build boarding ramps under those same restrictions, that would be a relatively simple thing to do.
Well, no, I wouldn't call it a simple thing. I mean, nonconformities are difficulties for businesses. There's some unknowns associated with them, so I understand where the applicant's coming from.
I think
There's
we all do,
uncertainty.
and that's
Yeah.
why we want to figure it out, but I don't know, maybe I'm just overthinking the whole thing.
Yeah, I just caution us not to be short-sighted. It may be the KCI coming in potentially. After that, when they leave in 20 years, pick a number, it could be a bicycle maker, or it could be something else that's a little more offensive to the neighborhood. We need to look, not in perpetuity, but certainly out in the future.
Well, we're defining that perpetuity with this allowable use table.
Are
Right.
Is that the
bicycles
point
on
of
there?
limiting it, is so that we don't
So we don't have to worry about that.
have to worry about
Yeah.
that in the future?
So like as of right now, if I go through this use table, I don't see, I went through this last time, I think I made that comment that I would like further revisions to the use table because there were things on there that I thought would be disruptive to a rural community right there. And now I see going through here, you know, an adult daycare does not seem a disruptive use to me, things like that. So we're defining that.
Right, there could be
Perpetuity
positive or negative
as of right
effects on
now.
the community or environment or whatever concern you might
Right.
have. We're not going to think of them all, and that's why the use table can be modified in the future depending on need, or, you know, what the
I don't think
No.
that's the case here.
No,
This use
no,
table.
we would adopt this use table, and that would
which can be
stay with.
amended.
Well, but they'd have to do this whole thing again.
I know.
Exciting for them. I think we're trying to be as mindful as possible about limiting use. They're offering to do things like landscaping and agreeing to some limitations with what I thought we agreed last time was we're trying to meet in the middle, right? We're trying to allow them to do with their property what they want to
We have
do.
them landscape, I don't remember reading about landscape.
It's in
Is it
the
in there?
Exhibit 2 here.
That would be 3B, landscape buffer plan as a requirement.
But we don't have anything on a map or a chart or a
I don't have a beautiful picture of it,
yeah,
but
that's what I'm,
I'm
they would-
sure they could provide us
Sure.
with one.
But it will, as stated here.
did you
will
say
still-
you could, Jay, or you would?
On the landscaping,
Yes.
it's what we're doing is the buffer that's in the code. So the code specifies what you have to
Buffer
do.
on four sides, or,
It's right
So there's
here.
a section 9.2, which then the planning department or division would still have to review and approve. Whether we give them approval today, that plan will go further down the line and be approved at a later date.
I guess I read that and I didn't pay attention.
Mr. Chairman, I just, in the interest of just trying to be helpful, I just want to kind of encapsulate, I think, what we've been talking about. So the purpose of the application is to make the property more sellable for the owner by making it more flexible for uses for someone that the current owner might sell it to, correct?
I mean, kind of. I mean, really, the purpose of the application is to show that we meet the criteria for physically developed exception, which I think that we do.
Right.
Right?
And-
You're talking about the practical
Correct.
implication of that.
Talk about the practical side. Why?
That's right.
Why you have been working on this so hard for so long to make this happen. And so, and then on the approval side, so staff has also worked very, very hard trying to accommodate within the side rails that they have to operate in the desire of the applicant to do this. And what we've been talking about is these certain areas from the staff perspective that don't check those boxes. And we understand that the applicant and that you as the agent for the applicant, your position is, well, yes, we do check those boxes. So there's kind of the rub. You're saying, we do check those boxes. Staff is saying, well, with the sideboards I have to live in, I can't agree to check those boxes, but I want to be as helpful as I can through all the rest of this. And obviously the commission here wants to be as helpful as they can to get this. So this is what we're trying to discuss is how can we be helpful and stay within our sideboards?
All right, a couple things with that. One is the earlier question about asking staff to speculate on what could or could not get approved as a nonconforming use. Non-conforming uses are extremely complicated. I don't think anybody can speculate forward what non-conforming use may or may not be, amendment may or may not be approved. I mean, you can kind of think about it in your head, but as a legal matter, that should not be part of a decision today because you don't know. It's speculating on a future permit action. With respect to that question, Commissioner Bennington, I think the issue is that first there was most of the back and forth with staff, because I was talked about before, was on the use table, and staff proposed some additional things to not allow in this location as not being appropriate for this rural area. The applicant agreed with those, and we said we're fine. So I think it enhances the compatibility. So that is the working together. Ton of applications we work on around, in Jackson County, and I mean, we work hard to get to yes with staff, but sometimes, and this is usually the circumstance, is when staff's position is there are criteria that apply or apply in a way that they're saying it has to be applied in a certain way, or those criteria have to be applied, and the applicant fundamentally disagrees, well, then that's where we end up in this situation, and you guys have to decide what you want to do. And getting into the legal and not legal, I mean, what I would say is the actual standard is Saporin, and is my understanding it's Saporin, and local jurisdictions have deference in interpreting their own plan and their own code. And Greg Hathaway's opinion is that you have sufficient legal deference to approve the application, and Greg has reviewed the findings, and he's like, these are defensible. So ultimately, if it's challenged, and I don't think it's gonna be, that's our burden to bear. That's the way it works.
Charles, is the overall goal of the planning department to eliminate non-conforming uses?
That's not the role of the planning department. There may be an argument in the comp plan that was from 1989 that there were some, and I made those arguments in the staff report, that it's in the comprehensive plan back then, but that's not the interest of the staff at the planning department.
So as a general rule, if a non-conforming use is on the ground, you don't care whether it stays forever or whether you have a chance, you would like to eliminate it and make it conforming in some way.
Well, I mean, I have no interest in removing all the nonconformities in the county, or staff doesn't, but.
One at a time.
Yeah, I mean, where a nonconformity is, I mean, I guess that's the interest of the comp plan, is to have nonconformities become nonconforming as best as possible over time. And when landscaping.
Say that again. That non-conforming uses become conforming over time? Is that what you said?
Where they, like, if there's a density of a use and that is removed, the nonconformities do expire, right? So if they're not been continued, if they're discontinued, that nonconformity does go away. So that there's a trigger in the land development ordinance that talks about discontinuance. So after, I think it varies on the type of nonconformity or when it expires. Nonconforming dwelling may not be continued after 4 years, I believe, as an example.
And in the case of this non-conforming use, could the footprint be changed? Things like, could additions be made? Could they rebuild part of it if it burned down? Such as that, would that be remain a non-conforming use of the same square footage, even if it had to be rebuilt?
Well, and Jay was right that staff doesn't want to presume that there is an approval waiting, for any kind of amendment to a nonconformity or any kind of application, where staff is always not saying, predicting the future of what can happen, because there's the whole land use process. So in the case of the Lumaweld, there was some early arguments that staff was concerned with the discontinuance. And there was a letter submitted that talked about that it hasn't been discontinued. And we moved on from that issue in this project. But that doesn't, when you're coming in for alteration of non-conforming use, you're limited to the parameters, especially in industrial use. If you're going to expand a building, and in my staff's opinion, the use is expanded in intensity, then the Chapter 11 talks about going to a rural limited industrial zoning process. So that's, again, did I answer your question about,
Well,
it's
not really,
possible.
but I think you did answer it in that the long-term history of non-conforming uses is that they go away.
I guess, yes.
Mr. Chairman, so I just wanted to follow up with Charles. So we've had a lot of discussion about the approval criteria, checking the boxes, the revised. And by the way, I understand exactly what the planning manager said. That the conditions of approval is a technical term. It doesn't mean that the staff has to approve the conditions for approval, but that's the name of that evidence that you reviewed. I totally understand that. But from a practical point of view, no matter what the decision of this body is today, this is going to go to the Board of Commissioners for a de novo review. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So whether we approve it or whether we deny it if we approve it or deny, regardless of what this body does, this is going to go to the Board of Commissioners for a de novo review.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm still toying or divided. It's a tough decision, and I agree. One of the provisions for getting into light industrial, it has to be supplied by city water and sewer, and that's never going to happen out there. So the workaround for that is to make it RLI. And that's another application, and we aren't going to approve that today.
But if I might add, if we look at, again, from the stance of community benefit, there are numerous what we call general industrial sites here in the valley, which are what would you think of like a heavy industrial site, which are served completely by private utilities, working at higher workloads. So I think, again, that's one of those, is it really necessary to continue and stop the approval type of situations that we have to come up with and decide today?
Are they on their own sewage too, Jack, or mainly on
Yeah.
public sewage, aren't they?
Sewer, I mean, there's plenty that work on septic fields. There's plenty of aggregate mines that work on industrial water rights that come from groundwater. There's all sorts of those things around.
I know about the water, I didn't know about.
No, and then again, we have to
Septic
make those
systems,
decisions
right.
where there's, okay, if it has, public sewer and no water, are we okay with that, right? And I think we can make that decision here today with, again, we're just making a recommendation, right? It's ultimately up to the board.
Yeah. Earlier this year, we did approve in White City industrial use and rezoning of a place that didn't have sewer or water from the city, or domestic, or municipal water or sewer. So it's not unprecedented. All right, this was interesting. Any other discussions from commissioners? All right. I guess we could admit exhibits. So if I hear a motion, I'll make it. If you don't.
Motion to submit exhibits, Mr. Chairman.
And Holly, that's what?
37 to 39.
Second.
Okay.
Commissioner Lavanino,
Yes.
Commissioner Bennington,
Yep.
Commissioner Elliott,
Yes.
Commissioner Sarah Wallen Daly.
Yes.
Commissioner Galpin.
Yes.
Thank you.
Deliberation.
Mr. Chairman, there is a clear desire to be helpful to this applicant on our commission, and there is clearly some, depending on which commissioner you're looking at, clearly a little bit of confusion on how we can be helpful. I want to thank staff for the tremendous amount of work that they've put into this. You know, sometimes you wish you had a magic wand, and if you could wave a magic wand and create something that's kind of unique and special, you might say, "Dear Board of Commissioners, we tried really hard to find a way to help these people, but we weren't quite able to, but we sure hope you can." You know, if I had a magic wand, I might try to do something like that, but. This is, as Mr. Chairman, as you've said yourself, this is a tricky one. This is a tricky one.
Take a motion, Sarah.
Mr. Chair, before you proceed to deliberations, I might suggest that you close the public hearing.
Okay. Hearing any further discussions, I hereby close the public hearing today.
Now make a motion.
I would love to make a motion to approve. Yes. Mr. Chair, based on the additional findings and conditions, I move that the Jackson County Planning Commission approve a recommendation for approval to the Jackson County Board of Commissioners to approve planning file 439-25-0003-LRP to allow a minor comprehensive plan map and minor zoning map amendment to change the comprehensive plan map from rural residential land to industrial land and rezone approximately 5.7 acres of the subject parcel from rural residential 5, RR5, to light industrial located at 2000 Rogue River Drive.
Second.
Can we clarify the conditions will be possibly changing by, when it gets to the board, that these are a work in progress?
Yes, agreed.
And so, sorry, and the new Exhibit 3 replaces the old Exhibit 3?
Yes, agreed.
He said all that.
Second.
Commissioner Lavanino,
No.
Commissioner Bennington,
Yes.
Yes.
Commissioner Elliott,
Yes.
Commissioner Wallen Daly,
Yes.
Commissioner Galpin.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I have to say this is probably one of the trickiest applications that we've heard in a long time. And again, I want to state that I really appreciate the amount of work that staff went into this, doing everything that they could within the envelope that they have to exist in to help this applicant. And I want to say that I am very, very confident that our commissioners, when they hear this application, that they will make the right decision, whatever decision they come up with, that they're going to make the right one. And I am grateful that at least for today that the applicant got some encouragement for this very complicated application. This kind of stuff is really hard and arcane, and I am sorry that our state is so hard for business people to operate in sometimes, but at least today, I'm happy to say, as just an Oregon resident, that an Oregon business that's been in business a long time got a little bit of encouragement today. Glad you got that encouragement today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I guess we're done for today. Close the public hearing, and we did that already, so we're, next item on the agenda. Thank you for all attending, and good luck.